Welcome to the Anton Stentner podcast. Today we're talking about the hidden housing crisis, what nobody's talking about. What are people talking about and not talking about? Because I have no idea what we're going to talk about today.
What nobody's talking about is we always discuss the housing crisis in terms of price and affordability, but we're missing out on availability. And in this video, we're going to just talk about this less explored idea of availability, the lack of homes, how it's impacting communities, how it's impacting businesses, exactly what happens, why it matters, and why you should pay attention to this, because this is the bigger problem. This is the monster lurking in the background.
Also, probably good, at least I'm curious, how it even happened, right? Like, why do we have a lack of supply? And I think one thing that I've learned from you in the last couple of years is how important supply and demand is in the housing market, and why this lack of supply has basically influenced everything, even when you think things like low interest rates or high interest rates or whatever should change. But this low housing is like a real big problem.
This problem started back in the Great Financial Crisis. During the Great Financial Crisis, what happened was builders, developers, and I worked for them. I was one of them. We could leverage at 100%, and everyone was giving you money. The money rained from the heavens. You said, I have a big bag of money. I want to bulldoze everything you own. And then houses were being built everywhere. What happened in new construction was new construction got into a massive oversupply across the U.S. And even here in the Seattle Metro, we had a massive oversupply.
2007, 8, 9.
It started in 2006, and then all of a sudden the problem ballooned out of control by late 2007, and then of course that went into the Great Financial Crisis. What happened then was builders couldn't qualify and banks didn't want to lend. So according to Zillow, in an article they released in June of last year, they said we are 4.5 million units behind here in the U.S. So that is a massive lack of availability, of inventory that's there. That 4.5 million units, for perspective, I believe in 2023, we had like 1.8 million people come into the country. Okay, and this is 1.8 million more population, exclude illegal immigration and all that stuff. But we only built like 1.2 million housing units. So it's getting worse every year, just even based on our population. So that lack of availability and the lack of inventory being built in 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12 is now showing up in that price problem, in that affordability problem. And it's hurting communities. It's hurting local businesses. It's hurting schools. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
So, number one, the silent crisis of housing availability, a tale of two cities. What cities?
So I wanted to kind of like give an example, So like, how would we illustrate this problem? So we're going to look at the Seattle Metro and Memphis, Tennessee. Now, I could have chosen, in the stark contrast in this, any of the states that are like high tech, high population. They're more of the blue states. They have a severe housing shortage. And then we can go to the red states. Now, I'm not trying to get political about this, but this is what the data says. And we go to ones that have less regulation, are easier to build and develop in. They have more housing, but they are still also unaffordable. So I chose Memphis, Tennessee, and Seattle, Washington, because we're here in the good old Seattle Metro. So Seattle is one of those cities that just exemplifies the severe housing shortage, a tech boom, and then massive regulatory overlay, which causes our housing prices just to shoot through the roof, even for our high income earners. So you're seeing our high income earners, tech workers that normally would be in kind of that Seattle, Bellevue area, have started to move into the secondary markets. Okay, they've moved 45 minutes away because even those high income earners, because housing prices have gotten so high, are being pushed out. And it's also started in, of course, super density in some areas, overcrowding, and a massively growing homeless population. Median sales price in Seattle, $790,000. Prices are up 7.6% year on year. The median days on market, 21.7. In other words, it takes about 22 days to sell a home. About 5% of all listings have had to have a price drop. And then the months of supply is 7.9 weeks. That's nothing. That's less than 2 months. Well, conversely, let's go look at Memphis, Tennessee. What's crazy is even Memphis, Tennessee is having an affordability crisis. But it's much more affordable than compared to the national average. What Memphis is seeing is they're seeing a shrinking population, stagnant wages, and areas that they feel safe and that there's decent housing available. So here too, they're also not quite building enough new, clean, nice units. Median sales price, $270,000. National is $420, just for perspective. Prices there, flat, okay, 0%. Median days on market, 38. Price drops, 5.2. Months of supply, 17. So there's 4 months worth of supply, but prices aren't going down and they're not rapidly rising. And it's because of these issues, but they're less there than they are in Seattle. So when we look at these two cities, that's kind of how the U.S. is breaking out, right? We've got really expensive ones that are very hard to develop in or build in, and we've got other ones that are more affordable, but they're still not as affordable as they should be. And so we go through this misnomer, right? And we call it affordable housing. I want all of our listeners to X that one out. I want you to be thinking about attainable housing, attainable home ownership, because when the government says affordable housing, they're talking about a housing unit, which means it could just be a rental. And I am more of a home ownership guy. I'm a middle class guy. I want to see everyone own a home with a little white picket fence and their dog and whatever else they decide.
Can I ask you a question? And I know this is going to have to be ballpark, but what's the monthly payments of these different markets?
Oh my goodness. Monthly payments.
420. So at 420, what would be like
at
the
420,
range?
You are like $2,500 a month.
Okay, this is going to get kind of crazy because, of course, you and I both know the price of the house is one thing, but the monthly payment probably even more important,
Yes.
right? So then 420 out in Seattle, 790. We're talking almost 800,000. What are we looking at?
You're looking at like almost $6,000, probably like 5,800.
Okay, let's just call it 5,800 to be conservative. And then Memphis, which is 270, super low. It's kind of crazy to think.
So you're going to be like 1,800.
So to give people a perspective, like
Now,
from a monthly payment.
This is also dependent upon taxes, insurance, things
for
like
sure.
that.
And then how much you put down,
Exactly.
broadly speaking. But you could almost say that that national average is in the mid 2,000, right? 2,500.
Yep.
In Seattle, it's mid to high 5,000, if not $6,000 monthly payments.
Yes.
And then in Memphis, where it seems to be more affordable, maybe the most affordable that I've seen, less than $2,000, if not $2,000.
Yeah.
So when you talk about unaffordability, even in Memphis, though, I mean, that's still like
It's still super expensive for Memphis.
exactly for whatever the medium income is. I just thought that'd be a good way because these other numbers at one point, it's like, what does it even mean, right? Because, but monthly payment, that's where like, if it's at $6,000 in any city, who the heck is paying that? And what kind of job do they have?
Well, that's that ripple effect that we were talking about. That's that beyond affordability where even individuals with high incomes are being forced out of the cities, forced into the suburbs and further out. Because what that's happening is the market is starting to exclude people based on their financial status. That rubs me the wrong way. I want everyone to be able to afford a home. That's why we're going through this, because we're going through this for our listeners, for our subscribers, so that one, you can understand as a home buyer or home seller what's happening in the market. Two, you can understand as an investor what's happening. And then three, you can make your best financial decisions. So next, you have this ripple effect where now it's affecting small businesses. Now it's affecting local schools. It's affecting economic growth because As housing becomes less affordable, people have to move to more affordable areas, which means only a certain income bracket can stay there. So if the average price of a home is $800, well, the median $790, the average in King County is 1.1. So I mean, median is the middle. The average is 1.1. So you need 2 tech workers making between 150 to 250 each to be able to afford that. Now, the further you go out, so what's that doing to the local businesses? What's it doing to their clientele? What's it doing to schools? See, this is massive ripple effects that just push through. And what happens is it's starting to stifle our economy because this housing crisis has gotten out of control and no one is solving it. So next, additional considerations. The role of zoning. So how is zoning greatly impacting this? So throughout most of the Seattle metro, actually, let's just go to Washington State. Washington State, we have what's called the Growth Management Act, which controls suburban sprawl, which means only certain areas inside of a UGA or a city limits can be subdivided. And we have tons of single-family homes. And we have, of course, multifamily and townhomes, but they can only be done in certain areas. What people don't realize is that zoning as a concept is an amazing thing and it needs to be done. When you do like we've done here in the Seattle metro and you don't allow the buildable land area to expand based on good population metrics. See, ours was put into place in the 90s and has not been significantly expanded since the 90s. And if you go look at housing since the 90s in Washington State, it's just gone, just rip up. There are little things that are coming to impact that, but zoning and red tape slow this down, make it cost a ton. The Master Builders Association, and I believe it was their chapter in Washington, released a study in 2003. And in that study, they broke down the cost of everything, the land costs, the permitting costs, the construction costs. Great study. I actually contacted them and asked them to do it again. But the moral of the story is the red tape accounted for a minimum of 10% of the cost in our home in our area. What it didn't account for, though, was the time. So let's say the actual dollar amount was 10%, but it doesn't account for the 2 years to get the development project done, or the 4 years to get the development project done, and then the next year to get the building permit after that. So I'd say, even though on paper you can show it's 10%, I'd say the number is as high as 25% of the cost, just due to that extended timeline in our area, is due to the red tape. So let's go think about it. If we said in Seattle, the average one was, or the median one was $790, let's call it $800, makes the math simpler. That means that that same home, if we were able to cut the red tape, cut the permitting timelines, could be $600,000. That is a massive savings relative to where we are. That's more attainable. There's other factors that are impacting this too. One, we have more people renting than we did previously. Two, we've got short-term rentals that are coming in. Whether we like it or not, and I'm a fan of short-term rentals, of Airbnbs, but short-term rentals take stock out of single-family homes and out of the rental home and hold it over here in the hospitality category and don't make it available for purchase or for rent. Next, we have a massive need for investment in attainable housing. And what I mean by that is we have to incentivize builders, developers to build starter homes. I had a gentleman walk into my office last week and we were talking about investing, and he said, "Why is nobody building the DB Johnson special?" DB Johnson was a builder in Snohomish County that was the largest private builder, and he probably built 10,000 units here.
Let me guess. 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, 12 to 1,400 square feet. Ramblers.
He built all these Ramblers, all these 2 stories, and they were
I lived in one. That was my first house.
And they were like 800 square feet to like the biggest ones were like maybe 1,800. But that was affordable. It was attainable, and it was built for the starter home, the first-time home buyer. The reality is no one is currently filling that gap. Why? You cannot build those homes economically today. And Logan at Housing Wire, he says this really well. Builders aren't the march of dimes. They are a for-profit business. If they can't make money doing it, they won't build it.
Couldn't you say that's also due to the red tape?
It is.
If they had red tape, like I'll give you an example. A really big project that I know of that is taken already 4 years.
Yeah.
But if you think about how long it could have been or it used to be, that could have been a 2-year project. By the way, from start to finish and sold. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's 4 years into it and it's going to probably be a 1 or 2 more years. So it's like it's 2 years versus 6 years. It's not just the investor that loses. What about the people that would have bought or moved into those homes? They don't have that home, right?
Bingo.
Secondly, what about all the work that would have been done and then people move on to other jobs? That's not happening. And then so as a builder, why aren't you doing the smaller ones? Like if I'm going to have the headache of doing this, I'm going to go luxury. I'm going to go bigger. I'm going to go higher price tag. So inevitably the red tape has like an obvious like expense, right? Like you said, 10%, and then potentially like the lost investment opportunity. But then what about all the other things beyond it? And then the decision of that builder to be like, you know what? Forget these little rinky-dink ramblers that barely make me anything. By the time the red tape's done and all the expenses come in, I'm going to go more, bigger, like
Bingo.
McMansions. And I know this for a fact because in the same area where this project is happening, that's 4 years into it, and it's going to probably take 5 or 6 more years. What do you see in all the other developments? McMansions with RV garages.
Yes.
Next to the normal garage.
Yeah.
Mother-in-laws, huge, beautiful, but guess what? The first-time home buyer ain't buying that.
No, because those are $1 million to $2 million homes. And I want to summarize what you said for our listeners. Our subscribers, you guys get this. Here's what Benji is saying. The builder can't make enough profit building the starter home because of the red tape. So what they're doing is they're building the upper end and luxury homes to make the most profit. They are a for-profit business. Duh. Therefore, we either have to get rid of all of the red tape or we have to massively incentivize. Number 2, or part 2 of this discussion about the housing crisis, is the invisible wall and barriers to the housing supply. The zoning conundrum. So the reason zoning is a conundrum is it defines the housing type that has to go in that area, and then it artificially limits it. And a lot of areas have reduced density, aka here in our area. What they're doing though is when we reduce the density, that's changing the minimum lot size requirements, aka the size of the lot. And with that minimum lot size requirements, what that's doing is that's forcing the cost of the land up, which forces the finished cost of the home up. It's just dominoes that bump into each other. The next one that you have is you have the NIMBYs. So not only, because I also know about this development project that you were mentioning, not only do you have the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people, in a lot of these states, you have the ability to file formal complaints, to deal with them. The particular development that you mentioned, during its open comment period, it received 44 complaints from neighbors. Those 44 NIMBYs then had to be addressed by county staff and dealt with to make sure that in their comment letter and in their final decision that all of the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted to make sure none of these complaints were valid. That way they didn't get sued in the future. That simply slows it down. It's so funny in relation to NIMBYs because what happens is they move to an area and there's these beautiful trees over there. And they're like, well, there are always going to be trees. And then all of a sudden someone puts up a development sign in regards to those beautiful trees. And they go, Well, not in my backyard. And then they go deal with it. But if you didn't want that to become no longer beautiful trees, maybe you should have bought it. Or
there was trees where your house was.
And there was trees at one point where your house was. It wasn't an open field. See, most of Western Washington is the evergreens. I mean, there's a few open fields, but it's a lot of trees. Once again, delays projects, increased costs, and then that discourages developers. Because to be honest, there are people, not like me, but there are people who, when they get those complaint letters, it crushes them. I've had to talk clients and first-time developers off the ledge because they get these letters, and it's from Susan Smith. And they're like, "Oh, Susan Smith hates me." No, Susan Smith is being a NIMBY, and she just doesn't want those trees to go away.
I'm gonna call them NIMBYs from now on.
This is increasing housing costs. It's reducing the availability of housing. It's reducing the availability of choices. And then it's segregating communities, because what it does is it prevents, once again, incomes. It decides if you don't have a certain income level, you can't live here. And that's going to always be there. So I'm not 100% against that. But what I'm against is this has gone so far that it's preventing the first-time homebuyer from getting a nice, decent home with a backyard where they can have their family and their friends over. In the Seattle Metro, it makes me sad, brother, because what's happening, because we're forcing zoning, is this forcing of zoning is meaning we're building the great indoors, and we're building more townhomes, and we're building more McMansions with small backyards, and we're building more apartments. Kids need backyards. Dogs need backyards. We need backyards so we can barbecue. So, next on our list, part 3, this starts displacing residents. And the displacement of residents is when I talk to my wonderful aunt and uncle from my mom's adopted family, and they can no longer afford to repurchase in the north end of the Seattle Metro, where they've lived for 45 years. They couldn't afford to purchase their home today. And because of life factors and things like that, they need to downsize and get all into one level and things like that. So they can't live there anymore. They're being forced directly out of the city and directly north. Now, there are people that go south too, but more of that population heads north into Snohomish County. And this happens in every metro. I'm just using ours as the example. They purchased their home for $45,000. Their home is worth $1 million today. He drives bus for the downtown King County Metro. He's getting ready to retire. They can't afford to repurchase in that area. So you're displacing residents. But not only just family, people that have grown up in that area, you're displacing workers. So if you're a restaurant worker in Seattle, you almost can't even afford to rent there. You can't afford to buy a home there. You have to go 30 minutes, an hour away, and then commute in. So this is increasing poverty. There's long-term social social issues. There's health problems that are created by this. And then this then moves into that growing homeless population. I drove through downtown Seattle just last week, and my daughter was in the back seat. And she looks over and goes, "Why is there so much graffiti?" And then she goes, "And Dad, did you ever paint any graffiti?" And I go, "I can neither confirm nor deny said graffiti painting in the 90s, but I do have a fondness for it." And she goes, "Why is there so much of it?" And I said, "Graffiti is a beautiful form of art that is also an active form of rebellion. And they're expressing something, and I believe that the reason for this expression is so out there right now. Part of the issue is housing. Now, it's not the total issue. But part of it is the lack of availability of housing that is attainable and affordable, which is causing more homelessness, more crime, more social unrest.
You know, one thing that's kind of interesting about the NIMBY, the not in my backyard, homeowners that are looking at new developments or different types of developments as a bad thing, they're trying to protect their house value, or probably the real truth, they want it to go up. And what they know is if an apartment building goes in, or even smaller houses, it actually brings down the price of their house. I think one of the lessons, at least that I'm seeing being in real estate and understanding the industry, and of course talking to you, is appreciation isn't all it's cracked up to be, especially out of control appreciation. But when you're a homeowner and maybe you don't watch the news, you don't have to buy a house, you don't have to think about affordability, you already got your house. You're just like, I love that my house price is going up. So you could even be a good-hearted person with great intentions and become a NIMBY because you're like, oh, I heard though, if they put in a rental or whatever, it could bring down. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. The problem is this. We have become a nation of, we love appreciation on our home because it's our investment, it's our retirement, when it's actually hurt us. Because down the road, what happens, no pun intended, your house does go up in value, right? All those people that have been displaced and are homeless now have to literally live on the street in front of you. This happened in LA.
Yeah.
House prices got so out of control, literally in nice neighborhoods, you have homeless people and people addicted to drugs that have mental things going on, pooping on the sidewalk.
Oh, all over San Francisco. It's all over the news.
Versus what if 10 years back, you were actually more open to the apartment that would have potentially let that person start their life, whatever that life was and wherever it starts, and maybe not becoming that person. And then on the flip side of that homeowner, this is what's really sad. How many senior people I know that can't even live in their house because they can't afford the taxes.
Because they can't afford the taxes.
Because the appreciation means the house value goes up, which guess what? The government loves getting those taxes.
Oh.
And then you have to move out of your lifelong family home. And where do you move? Because guess what? Everything else is expensive. So you also get displaced to a place where you have to go into maybe a retirement home. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying maybe you don't want to, but that's all you can afford. Or two, you have to move way away from here. Oftentimes, guess what happens? Arizona.
Yeah. The people move to a warm state that has higher affordability and a warmer climate than our area. And, you know, I didn't even go down that, but this is a good one to nail on real quick. One of the things that is reducing the availability and causing more displacement is the taxes and the insurance. So when you go look at insurance inside of CPI, you can see that over a 3-year run or whatever it was, it went up 20%. But when I talk to homeowners, when I talk to our investors, most people saw anywhere between a 25 to a 40% increase in their insurance. And it's gotten worse in certain states that have the climate issues, you know, Florida, California with their wildfires. So it's gotten worse in certain states. And then property taxes have gotten just extremely out of control because we just went through one of the largest appreciation that we've ever seen over the, you know, from COVID because of the money printer. They turn on the money printer, go brr. We bring interest rates down for the ZIRP era, so we have unbelievably cheap debt with an unbelievable amount of money sloshing around the system, and real estate just went vertical. The problem is like you said, that NIMBY is sitting there, and NIMBYism is fear-based. All of these bad emotions are generally fear-based. So it's a worry about what could happen, what would happen to my value. I have to protect mine just in case. I don't want that to happen. That protectionism that has shown up as red tape, let's just call it, is allowing home prices to appreciate faster than they should, while at the same time property taxes and insurance go up. So about a third of people's bill is always property taxes and insurance. If their payment stayed the same because they were in a 30-year fixed debt, their property taxes and insurance still may displace them from Seattle, and they have to now move to Mount Vernon. Or they've got to go from Seattle and they got to move to Lacey.
Nothing wrong with Mount Vernon.
Nothing wrong with Mount Vernon.
They have a great co-op there.
All I was saying, or just closing with there, they're being displaced from where they were and forced to move somewhere else due to that super high cost.
So, okay, with all this being said, the obvious thing is, wow, this is a great opportunity for investors to build more homes and make more money. Why are they not, and what's the solution?
So I want to go through path forward. So that's kind of our part 4 is path forward. And then I will answer what should a buyer do, what should a seller do, and what should an investor do. But what's a path forward? So one, we need to rethink zoning in general. There are approximately 800 different types of zoning throughout the U.S. We need national zoning. We need a simple rule book. We need something to follow. We were actually just complaining, I'll be honest, because we're recording this right at the beginning of the year. It's the end of the holiday season. No one is answering our emails anywhere in any city, any county, and they've received 2 to 3 emails from us over the last 2 weeks, and it's just Ghostville.
The counties,
the cities where we have projects. If AI was in charge, because it can read this, it can read housing plans, it could read the code, it could just be like, brrrt, here's the 10 things you need to fix these 10 things and resubmit. So I think 1, we have to rethink the actual development code itself. 2, we have to rethink zoning. 3, we have to rethink the human involvement in this. What we've done is we've allowed municipalities, cities, and counties to become weird versions of the DMV, a gatekeeper. You walk in, Sid the Sloth is behind the counter, and welcome to, and they're just, but now they get to make a decision based on their knowledge or lack of knowledge, based on an interpretation, based on how they feel, which slows the process down. So for example, there is a city that has a development code that doesn't allow the garage door to be more than 35% of the face of the front of the structure. That means if you're on a standard 40-foot wide lot with a 30-foot wide home,
you have to have a 1-car garage.
You can't make a 2-car garage fit on it.
That's dumb zoning.
It's dumb zoning. It's dumb development guidelines. It's dumb standards. It worked 20 years ago when their average lot size was a 1/4 acre.
When you could drive through the alley that was in the back of the house, and that's where the garages were, and the front could be nice and pretty.
Bingo. And so I am paying a development consultant, and I've got in front of the mayor, and I've got in front of the planning director to argue with these people, and they're like, well, it's going to change sometime next year. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to submit it again anyway, and let them tell me no again, and then I'm going to bring a copy of all of the bills, because we've spent 3x that we should have. I'm going to go to every person in this, and then I'm going to go get involved at the planning and help change this. We've got to do things that promote density. So in Washington State, for example, we started allowing ADUs, accessory dwelling units, aka the little mother-in-law cottage, and DADUs, detached accessory dwelling units. The state passed that law and just forced that into existence. You're going to see more of that happen. You've seen states like Oregon eliminate single-family zoning. You're seeing the city of Everett on their docket. They will have no single-family zoning in 2025. If their current proposed plans come through, single-family zoning will no longer exist in Everett. And almost every lot will allow 6 units on it, no matter what. If it's an existing lot, 6 units. Now, it doesn't mean you can make it fit with parking and stormwater and height restrictions. There's always other restrictions, okay? And the maximum impervious surface. But that's what we need. We need changes that allow innovation to happen and more density. Now, I don't love more density. I grew up in the country over there in Arlington. I want everyone to live on 10 acres. Washington State's not going to allow that, and most municipalities aren't going to allow it. We need to look at low interest loans. So for the first-time homebuyer, just for example, and I'm not saying for investors. I'm not saying for the move-up people. I'm not saying for the people who make $250,000 a year. I'm saying a first-time homebuyer, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac say, you know what? You get 1% off of your rate when you buy your first home. That would be great to help, especially in some of these unaffordable areas. We need tax incentives, like we mentioned before, to help people who build attainable housing for first-time home buyers, that build affordable housing rental units or low-income housing rental units. And I know we have some of that, but I think we need more. I think we need to set aside funds for land acquisition funds, for specific funds from specific banks that are government-backed that allow land acquisition to happen with a government-backed debt that's stable and secure, that's not egregiously priced, that's actually somewhat maybe even aggressively priced, to build attainable housing. We need to have inclusionary zoning. We need to look at increasing rent supply. See, one of the things too that happens is people say rent is unaffordable. Rent is unaffordable due to the lack of rental units being built.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand. Go back to the original thing we started with. 4.5 million units behind. If you're 4.5 million units behind, that is both for sale, owner-occupied product and for rent product. It's a combination of both of them. And about 32% of our population rents. So let's just call it a third. A third rents, 2/3 owns. If rent prices are too high, we need to build more rentals. We also need to put together incentives to maybe rehab some of the older product. Because if older product was made new and there were tax incentives to do it, some of these landlords might clean up some of their more dumpy sites, making neighborhoods safer, cleaner, more hospitable. I believe that as we increase funding opportunities for attainable housing, and as we decrease red tape and decrease regulation, this then helps to also address our homeless population. Part of the reason there's a homeless population throughout the Seattle metro and other very expensive states like ours is it's just unaffordable. Now, I get it. Part of it is addiction and part of it is mental health. So don't blow me up in the comments about this. That's part of it too. We have to address that. But you also have to, even if it is addiction or mental health, there's a housing component attached to that where you have to be able to put them somewhere. You have to be able to help them through that process. We have to expand housing vouchers. Okay, now this is more on the rental side. And work on combating discrimination. So if I'm a home buyer, if I'm an investor, what should I be doing? As a home buyer, I hate to tell you this is the second most unaffordable time in history. And due to the lack of supply that's coming in the Seattle metro and throughout most of the U.S., there's only a few places, Utah, Texas, and parts of Florida, that have a little bit of oversupply in new construction. And I'm talking a little bit, a drop in the bucket. Nothing like it was during the great financial crisis. In all of these other ones, we just don't have enough housing. So that first-time home buyer is going to have to hunt for off-market deals. They're going to have to go find an experienced real estate broker who knows how to help first-time home buyers. They need to go talk to a lender earlier and get their credit ready get their income ready much further than they would have in the past. So in other words, if you're thinking about buying a home in the next 6 to 12 months, I want you to go start talking with that awesome real estate broker and that awesome lender today, because you need to get further ahead of that process. You need to work on improving that credit and improving that down payment, and possibly even talking to Dear Aunt Tilly. Dear Aunt Tilly is our fictitious friend or family member who has the ability to give you some type of financing about a down payment. And in today's day and age, because things are so expensive, it may require multiple people to purchase a home. Mom, dad co-signing, your aunt, uncle co-signing, something of that nature. You're going to have to get more creative. Last but not least, I want you to think about, how do I increase my skills and get my active income up? I don't know what we need to be thinking about that. If I want to buy a home, get my active income up, get my debt down, get my credit up, purchase. Boom, let's rock and roll.
No more YOLO life.
No more YOLO. A young man came into the office. We're having an amazing discussion. And he was asking me these questions. What should I do? He's 19. I said, you have to figure out, I need you to talk to a lender today. He goes, I don't even have a job. I'm a college student. I said, I would talk to a lender today. Figure out exactly what I need. Then I would go talk with all my friends and my family members and Dear Aunt Tilly about where I can get a down payment. And I would do some door knocking and look for someone to own or finance something. And I'd send a bunch of letters. I was like, this is way more work than you think. And then you're going to buy a split level, and you're either going to live in the master bedroom and rent out every room, or you're going to buy a duplex, triplex, or fourplex and live in one unit and still rent out the other rooms and then rent out the other units. I was like, if you do that and you're 19 or 20 and you make that happen, your life will be forever permanently changed. A decade later, you'll be ahead of everyone. For our investors, I want you to be thinking about, where is strong population growth? Where is good economic growth? And where are there barriers to entry in housing, AKA the Seattle Metro? So we sold all of our stuff out of state and we brought it home. Why? Because the data shows that over the next 12, 24, and 36 months, the Seattle Metro is going to out-appreciate most of the metros. In 2024, we did, depending on where you were looking, between 7 to 9% appreciation, with stupid high interest rates and no inventory. So investors, you're looking for that sweet spot like Seattle, where you're going to buy, ride that appreciation wave, even if the cash flow wave isn't here, and then know that when rates drop, you're going to then cycle that product again and just roll up. Side note, talking to one of our longtime investors, they own almost 100 units. They've been investors for 20 years. They build stuff for themselves. And I said to her, what is the biggest mistake you've made in real estate investing? And this isn't 100 units in the Midwest. This is 100 units here. So you can think this is hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate. And she looks at me and she said, you're going to beat me by a long shot. I said, why? She said, you're doing what I didn't do. I said, what was the mistake? Like, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, like she's going to give me the golden nuggets here. And she goes, every 3 to 5 years, I should have cycled. If I would have sold every 3 to 5 years, I could have double to triple where I am now. But what happened was, because I'm a stable, steady person, I'm a numbers person, I would get comfortable. And so I wouldn't push, because it felt good, because the income was coming in and things were okay. And I was happy in my comfort, when I should have just pushed to make it grow further. Because I'm realizing how much money my kids need, and my grandkids, and possibly my great-grandkids whenever they show up. And I'm helping them now, and that takes a lot of income in order to do that. It blew my mind, but it makes sense. What happens is investors, they make this mistake and they get comfortable because the same feels normal, so they don't push it to the next level. Builders, developers, I think it's an amazing time for us. I think this is the best opportunity I've seen in my career since the early 2000s, because inventory is so low and land use is so hard in the Seattle Metro, and it's hard in a lot of other areas too. Buying right. It's all about the purchase. It doesn't matter how good you think the back end is. You make all the money on the purchase. So buy the right piece of land that's got heavy zoning, or you can rezone it that you can get done in the next year and a half to 2 years. Because I will bet you money 24 months from now, our rates are lower than 7%. And if our rates are lower than 7%, our market will be appreciating faster and you can catch that wave. So that's what we're betting on. General public, builders, investors, concerned citizens, how do you fix this? You get involved in local politics. You go to your city council meetings, you go to your county council meetings, you talk to your planning commissions and the planning directors, and you make your voice heard about attainable housing, about permit timelines, development timelines, about mitigation fees, timelines, about response timelines, and about the sheer layer of red tape and conflicting code. There's so many rules that have been put into these rule books. These, they call it the municipal code. They conflict with each other, and they're all open for interpretation. We need to refine that process, and we need citizens telling their public officials that are elected officials, this is what we need. We need to solve the housing crisis by creating more available housing. And we create more available housing by cutting the red tape and allowing more units to be built faster, quicker, cheaper, and incentivizing the first-time home buyer and that affordable. That's what has to be done. I'm Anton. Hopefully you enjoyed this. This one right here, this hits so close to home because if you think about why things are so unaffordable here in Seattle and unaffordable in California and in Oregon and in New York and in parts of Texas, it's because of these issues. It's because the government bureaucracy has gotten so big, it's strangleholding innovation and it's forcing population to do things they don't necessarily want to do. So if I missed something, drop it in the comments. If you guys have questions, let us know. We're here to answer them. And thank you for listening today.